Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Jayan Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvajaka Ashtotar that Sri Srimad is Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvajaka Ashtotar that Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Text 65. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. On this 21st day of April, 2025 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 2 entitled Contents of the Gita Summarized. Text 65 in the middle of page 131. Prasade sarvadukanam hanir asyopajayate prasanna chetaso yashu buddhi parihavatishtate. Prasade sarvadukanam Hanirasyopajayate Prasanna-chetaso yashu Buddhi paryavatishtate Prasade sarva-dukkanam Hanirasyopajayate Prasanna-chetaso yashu Buddhi paryavatishtate Prasade sarva-dukkanam Hanirasyopajayate Prasanna-chetaso yashu Buddhi paryavatishtate. Tapas. Prasade sarva-dukkanam Hanirasyopajayate Prasanna-chetaso yashu Buddhi paryavatishtate. Okay. Prasade sarva-dukkanam Hanirasyopajayate Prasanna-chetaso yashu Buddhi paryavatishtate. Go ahead, Ami. Prasade sarva-dukkanam Hanirasyopajayate Prasanna-chetaso yashu Buddhi paryavatishtate. Page 131. Go ahead. Prasade sarva-dukkanam Hanirasyopajayate Prasanna-chetaso yashu Buddhi paryavatishtate. Kathy, not yet? Okay. Bhakta Chad.
Prasade sarva-dukkanam
Prasade sarva-dukkanam
Hanirasyopajayate
Hanirasyopajayate
Prasanna-chetaso yashu
Prasanna-chetaso yashu
Buddhi paryavatishtate.
Buddhi paryavatishtate. Anyone else out there, Tapas? Okay, word by words. Did you want to try? Prasade sarva-dukkanam Hanirasyopajayate Prasanna-chetaso yashu Buddhi paryavatishtate. Okay, word by words. You read along silently. Prasade, on achievement of the causeless mercy of the Lord. Sarva, of all. Dukkanam, material miseries. Hanihi, destruction. Asya, his. Upajayate, takes place. Prasanna-chetasaha, of the happy-minded. He, certainly. Ashu, very soon. Buddhi, intelligence. Paryavatishtate, becomes well established. Translation. Krishna says, for one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. Okay, so there's no purport. Let's go along. I'll go to the next verse. Nasti buddhira yuktasya nachayuktasya bhavana nacha bhavayatak shanti ashantasya kutaksakam. One who is not connected with the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? Purport. Unless one is in Krishna consciousness, there is no possibility of peace. So it is confirmed in the 5th chapter, 521, that when one understands that Krishna is the only enjoyer of all the good results of sacrifice and penance, that he is the proprietor of all universal manifestations, and that he is the real friend of all living entities, then only can one have real peace. Therefore, if one is not in Krishna consciousness, there cannot be a final goal for the mind. Disturbance is due to want of an ultimate goal. And when one is certain that Krishna is the enjoyer, proprietor, and friend of everyone and everything, then one can, with a steady mind, bring about peace. Therefore, one who is engaged without a relationship with Krishna is certainly always in distress and is without peace, however much he may make a show of peace and spiritual advancement in life. Krishna consciousness is a self-manifested peaceful condition which can be achieved only in relationship with Krishna. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshu unmilitam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So, we're almost winding up with this chapter, and Krishna, if we go back to 62, we'll see that this is these two verses go together, 62 and 63. And Krishna is describing the standard way in which the living entity becomes more and more entangled in the material world. So I'm just going to read the translation to these verses. While contemplating the object of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. Here, lust means very strong attachment, not just sex desire. And then he goes on. What happens from that lust? From anger, when the lust is not satisfied, anger arises. From anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So this is very important because this comes up in the verse we read today, the intelligence, how the intelligence, the threefold miseries, the intelligence is soon well established if one is satisfied in Krishna consciousness. So the intelligence is the key, and that's what we're trying to work with here by reading and studying Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So this is that it falls down again in the material. How to avoid that? The remedy is there in text 64. Raga dvesha vimukta I'm sorry, no Sanskrit. But on the other hand, a person free from all attachment and aversion, and able to control his senses through regular principles of freedom, can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. So this is the alternative. In other words, who is free from all attachment and aversion. Now, how can he become free from all attachment and aversion? That's the question. By the process of Krishna consciousness. It's not that you're free from all attachment, you're free from all material attachment. Your material attachment becomes sublimated into attachment for Krishna, which is wholesome attachment. The more attached we are to God, the less we are attached to matter, and the more that we'll be free from the shackles of desire to enjoy matter and fear of matter, and all. This is the two poles, which brings us back again and again for birth and death, when we're forgetting Krishna and we're focused on material desires and fears. So, free from all attachment. Now, how does he get that way? Through practicing the regulative principles of freedom. Now, we know we have these regulative principles, the regulative principles. No illicit sex, no gambling, no intoxication, no meat eating. And though if one is serious about Krishna consciousness, then he'll try to embrace those. It may be difficult at first because we're so habituated. We've established attachment for one or more of those generally in this modern world. So, but there's more than those. This is not through the regulative principles of freedom, but through regulative principles of freedom. In other words, there's a whole do's and don'ts. In any process that you want to follow, you want to go from here to there. I always give the example of athletes. You know, every 4 years they have the Olympics, and it's such a competition, you know, to get into the Olympics, what to speak of win a gold medal. This is the ideal. Oh, you know, I'm famous, you know, and I can get sneaker endorsements. I can get rich too, you know. So that's the goal. But how to get from here to there? Okay, I may be pretty athletic, high school sophomore. You know, now what? Well, then you got to get some training. You got to go. You know, how do you get really fast so you can run fast or you can jump high or whatever they do? You know. There's, over all these years, you have managers or coaches who can tell you how to develop that. And if your intelligence is fixed on it, In other words, you don't waver in your determination, you go through the austerities of getting in shape and all of these things, then a very few can actually get, the high, the gold medal or the silver medal or the brass medal, whatever it is. So that's true of anything. The common thing throughout millions and millions of people in the world is getting a college education, right? That's an austerity. And why? Why do you want a college? Because at the end of the college education, I'll be able to get a good job and have a success. And of course, that's been betrayed now. You end up with a big pile of debt that you can never pay off into your 60s. You end up paying it off with your Social Security check because it's the interest, right? So it's dashed. The dream is dashed, for so many. But it's a standard process in the material world. If you're fixed on a goal, then like say you go in the military, well then you got to go to training, and you get this and that, and it dries up. So in the spiritual realm, there's a similar thing because you're training the senses, you're training the intelligence, the mind. Everything has to be Krishnized, as Prabhupada said, very Krishnized. So. Free from all attachment and aversion, and able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom. Now, we're going to see at the end of chapter 4, at the end of chapter 3, there's a wonderful section where Arjuna asks a question that's, as soon as I read that, when I first read it, I was thinking, oh, this is like someone is a drug addict or something. If you do things, he says, Atakena prayukto yam papam charri purusha. Anichan vivarshanaya baladi vinayojita. Anichan means you don't really want it, but you're forced to do it. I know this is bad for me, but okay, I got it. Smoking. People are smoking today. After all, it's obviously bad for you. But somehow you get hooked, and your body is so strong. It's the senses. This is where the senses take over. They overwhelm the mind and the intelligence, and you're victimized. So that's there in a less obvious way. With anyone who's simply materialist, doesn't have any inkling about Krishna consciousness or yoga or anything like that, just an ordinary person, The addictions may not be called addictions, but you could become addicted to all kinds of food and movies, the cell phone, people living on I take my walk, I get so many lessons on this walk, and I like to say good morning. Probably would do that. Some people I say Hare Krishna. There's a few people who wave to me and say Hare Krishna. They know, it's experienced. We have some influence over the years. But so many people, they're on their phones. They're walking down, they got the little white ones. Those are the expensive ones. Those are the apples, right? I have a cheap set for $25, which I don't wear on my walk. And they're completely absorbed in the phone. And so I don't even bother, to try to break through that, say, good morning, no. At least they have to be awake. But that's an addiction. That can be total addiction, And tragically, I remember I had some friends here, they were a couple. An Indian gentleman came to learn something about computers or something. He was from Canada. And he had brought his wife with him. I think they had this little child. And she would come all the time, and then he came sometimes. And eventually they bought a whole set of Bhagavatams. And I went to where they were staying. They were renting some apartment, and I installed it for them and everything like that. So we were kind of friends. So when they moved to Toronto, I used to go there every year for the Ratha Yatra. So one year I couldn't stay with the person I had been staying with, so I stayed with them in their place, and I saw their little child. They couldn't have been more than 2 years old. It wasn't a phone. I think it was a little iPad, like the kind I have. And I didn't say anything about it, but that's kind of a little too early. So this is the world we live in. It's a world of addictions, not necessarily drugs or anything, but all kinds of very powerful attachment. Free from all attachment, exactly the opposite, full of all attachments, So how does one get free of all attachment? By the process of Krishna consciousness. It has to be, you have to engage your intelligence and your mind, because that's what's going to move the senses, you see? So therefore you say, no, I'm not going to do what I always used to do and I'm habituated to do. I know that I should chant Hare Krishna now. And that chanting is the key. Because the holy name of Krishna is non-different from Krishna. It's mystical. There's no way of explaining it. It's just mystical. Krishna is there in his name. And if you just chant, you may be full of all kinds of thoughts, but if you just make the effort to chant and hear, 1 round, 2 rounds a day, and you come in the kirtan, you get used to chanting Hare Krishna and hearing Hare Krishna. That alone will diminish the fever of your attachments for the material world. Because Krishna is all attractive. He's naturally attractive for every single soul. But without that intelligence to be able to withdraw the mind from all the other attachments, like the animals can't become Krishna conscious. They just don't have the intelligence, to do that. But some fortunate animals, I like to tell this story. I don't know if you... We had a cat here. I've been here for 37 years now, going on 7 years. So we had a little cat. You remember the cat. And he would always show up for breakfast, and he was totally addicted to cheer. I mean, they like milk, right? So so I would take a little spoonful and put it on a leaf and put it down there, and the little cat would, like that. So after a while, I gave a name to the cat. It wasn't. I thought it was Narada Muni, but it might have been Narottam Das Thakur. And I said, you can't call a cat Narada Muni, It was too late. Who knew the name? And of course, eventually he passed away. I wasn't there for that. But that was a very fortunate cat. Even though he probably didn't know anything about, that this is offered and it's wonderful, he got purification there. He got attracted to that. In his next life, maybe as a human being, he'll also be near a temple or in a temple, and he'll be able to get kir. And now that connection. So anyway, that's the process of Raga Vaishava Muktais too, being free from the attachment and the aversion. Those are the two things. So what does that leave you with? Detachment. You see? Detachment means not attracted and not averse, but simply equipoised in dukkha and sukha. Mata sparshas tu konteya shitoshnas tu dukkha da. Agama pahino anitjas tam tatikshvasa bharata. Right in the beginning, text 14, I think it is, of the 2nd chapter. Matra sparshas, the touch of the senses produces the dualities. To Konteya, Shita, Oshna, Sukha, Dukkha. He gives an example. Shita is winter or cold, and Ushna is hot. So we know it can be too cold or too hot. You see? This is a verse about tolerance. And in India, the Shita is happy, right? Because it's too hot, right? So Shita, Oshna, Sukha, Dukkha, da. The Shita matches up with the Sukha, and the Ushna, it's summer, too hot, right? That's the Dukkha. So they give the happiness and distress. But Agama Payano, it comes and it goes, Agama Payano, anityas, is not eternal. Therefore, tang tatikshra bharata. Developing the ability to tolerate. Now that means tolerating the pains that may come and tolerating those urges to engage in sense gratification. That's also tolerance. And if you keep controlling them, sublimating them, because the process of just repression is not going to work. And probably even says here, it's in a verse, I think, what can repression accomplish? Krishna says. You can't repress. You have to have an outlet for your desires of the eyes and the senses and so forth. So the tongue, okay, take prasadam. The eyes see the deities. The ears drink in the nectar of the holy name and all of these nectar verses, I can give you. And even the touch, you can work with the deities and everything can be sublimated, can be transcendentalized. So then you become free from all material attachment and aversion, and you're able to control your senses through the regulative principles of freedom, and you can attain complete mercy of the Lord. And then, from that, the verse we read today, pasare sarva dukkhanam haya, that destroys all miseries. And asyopajayate, material, let's see, hanir asya upajayate, takes place. And then prasanna chetasu, and then you become happy, naturally happy. Isn't that be great? You wake in the morning and you just feel so blissful because, there's another day in Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. I'm telling you, for years, now it's so convenient. You get these little Bluetooth speakers. So first thing I do when I get up, I hit the button, and there's Prabhupada giving a lecture, recorded in 1974, or whatever it is, Juhu Beach, they say you're there. And you're listening to Prabhupada, and your whatever dreams they get dissipated, It's very potent. And then the key here, buddhi, the intelligence becomes well established. And that gives you the ability to have peace and peace of mind. In other words, not so much agitation. The whole idea is that, that just thinking and obsessing about what may happen if this is a dangerous thing. Oh no, I don't have money for my rent. It can wreck your whole, you can just, what's going to happen? Is the landlord going to come today with an eviction notice? Oh my God, So there's no peace. Nothing may actually happen, but you can't be happy that way. So to be peaceful means even if it does happen, you're able to tolerate, and you're able to be on that spiritual level. That's what that famous verse, Tate nukampam susamikshamano bunjana evatma kritam vipakam vidvag vapubhi vidadan namaste jivetayo mukti padesadayabak. Such an important verse. Because what he's saying is, Tate anukampam susamikshamano. So, bunjana evatma kritam vipakam. When vipaka comes, when negative things happen in our lives, we may come down with a disease, or a million different things can happen. So, how do we integrate that into our Krishna consciousness? It can be a killer for God consciousness. Prabhupada would tell the story of the German wives during World War II. They're in Germany, and their husbands, their sons, their brothers, and their fathers even, sometimes they would get, near the end of the war, they were taking everybody. And the old men would get drafted in, it's crazy. So, but what did they do? Well, they're very, devout Lutherans probably. Germany, there's a lot of Lutherans there, but they're Christians. So they would go to church and ardently pray with all their heart, please send my son back, please send my husband back, please, 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 please. And many of them didn't come back. They got killed in the war, I'll tell you a little story. I had the opportunity to go to Russia, I think it was 3 times. And first time I went to Moscow, and I'd never been there before, and so the devotees were telling me this. And they said, you see that big apartment block there? There were a bunch of buildings in there. That was all constructed by prisoners of war, German prisoners of war, Basically, they worked them to death. It was a nightmare situation, but they had physical labor, And okay, what was how did I get into that? Telling a story. Yeah, I was just saying, so in other words, can you imagine yourself in that position? I mean, it's frightening. You don't want to think about it, But that's the situation of someone who's controlled by the lower self. This comes up very graphically in the third chapter. In that section about Arjuna, what is it that impels one to do something, even though you know intellectually that it's bad for you? Lighting up a cigarette. I know it's bad. It says right on it's hazardous to your health. I can't stop it. And Krishna says again, like here, kama. It's strong material desire that's implanted in your mind, in your intelligence, and your senses, especially. And the intelligence is victimized by the lower self. There's a very graphic verse. Anyone who's come to my class probably heard this one. It has a nice poem attached to it. So this is a verse, I think it's written by Madhavendra Puri. That was what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said in one of his essays. So it goes like this. Prabhupada would quote this verse, Kama dinam. It starts with kama. It starts with that lust. Kama dinam, etc. Lust, anger, greed, illusion. Kama dinam. Patikatata kamadinam. How's it go? Kamadinam. Katina katita palita durni deshas tesha jata mayana karuna nattapano prashantihi utrijaitam atayarupate sampratam labdha buddhis tvamayata kshadanam abhayam mam niyung svatmadase. Now you notice that word buddhi in there. That's also right here in the verse we read, right? Buddhi parihivatishtade. The key is the intelligence. That's the intelligence, discriminating factor. So what he says here, In how many ways have I sought to obey the seductive demands of my wicked desires? This is what it described at the end of chapter 3. He's forcing us to do that. How many ways have I sought to obey the seductive demands of my wicked desires? They've shown me no mercy, yet on I've gone, shamelessly trying to quench lust's unquenchable fires. But now I'm rejecting these hellish desires, for my higher intelligence now has awoken. O Krishna, O shelter of fearlessness, please let me serve you with faith that will never be broken. And that's really the turning point. You know, the living entity, by the practice of Krishna consciousness, you get a little bit of sanity, you're able to see in perspective, and you understand how all these births, you know, you don't remember them, but you know you had them. You've been controlled by the lower self. And in many of those births, you weren't even a human being. You still had an intelligence, rudimentary in the mind and all this, but you're coming up, 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 up. Now we're in the human form of life. With the superior intelligence of all those lower animals, plants, they also have rudimentary consciousness. So we have an opportunity to strengthen that intelligence so that the higher self can control the lower self. At the end of chapter 3, Krishna says, Evam buddhe pudam buddhas samstapyapanam atmanam jahishattam mahabhava kamarupam darasaram. Thus understanding with your intelligence that you are transcendental even to the intelligence, control the lower self by the higher self and conquer this enemy of lust, the enemy of the soul. And interesting enough, the next verse, that's the last verse of the third chapter, next verse of the fourth chapter, he talks about this yoga. Imam vivasute yogam. I instructed this imperishable science of yoga. Well, what science of yoga is that? You're just talking about controlling the lower self with the higher self. That is the essence of yoga, of bhakti yoga. With your intelligence purified and strengthened by your sadhana, by chanting the holy name, studying the shastra, living the life, you know, doing those things that you should do and refraining from those that you shouldn't do, then this enables you to do what he said at the end of the third chapter. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. And that lust is again, that's also purified and sublimated into strong attachment to Krishna. And the strongest attachment to Krishna is by the gopis, and it looks just like lust, but it's not lust. It's very powerful desire to please Krishna. It's explained very nicely. Chapter 4, Adi Lila of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. You have that book, Kathy, the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Go to the first volume, chapter 4. You'll see that. It all describes the difference between lust and love. This is, Krishna's Kavya is speaking. The difference between lust and love. Atmandriya priti vanchatari balikam. The desire, the strong desire, the obsession to satisfy one's own senses, that's lust. And the same, Krishnendriya prativancha dare prem nam. But the strong desire to please Krishna's senses is prema, is love of Krishna. And the point is that strong desire and actually doing that produces the highest pleasure. That produces this pleasure that we read about throughout the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Krishna is full of ananda. What's the difference between ananda and bhoga, and kama? Well, favorite verse. Bhoga, what is it? Not bhoga shvaya pasaktanam, but yehi sangsparjaja bhoga dukke yonaya evate adyantavanta konteya nateshu ramate buddha. Intelligent people, again we're back to the intelligence, do not take part in the pleasures that are derived from the senses contacting their objects, which is all around us, you see. Why? O son of Kunti, such pleasures are the source of all misery, and they have a beginning and an end, and so the wise do not delight in them, you see. So it has these two aspects. One is that it's the source of all misery. Well, how is that? Well, sometimes immediately, like the pleasures of the drugs and the cigarettes and the drinking, obviously that's the source of any sane person, who's not into it. But beyond that, those desires will keep you bound up to birth, old age, disease, and death. Body is temporary, but the soul is eternal. So we never die. We simply change bodies. But what determines what kind of body we're going to get? Our consciousness at the time of death, the prominent thought. And if you're filled with all kinds of these unfulfilled desires because you're so old you can't enjoy like I used to do when I was, I could do dance and I could drink all night, it was so wonderful. And you're thinking of all these pleasures that you used to have. And now I'm in this miserable body, I wish I was dead. Then you are dead, and the body's gone, but you're not dead. There you come into another body, and it's probably subhuman. So that's the main problem that we have. People don't know that. They think that the main problem, I just can't get enough, sense gratification. I got to get to a situation where I can be peaceful and enjoy sense gratification. No, that's complete illusion. So now back to this verse. Oh, I gave you the verse. So he's realizing we are by nature servants, although we have the illusion that we're masters. You see, we're servants of our senses, of our mind, of our intelligence, all these things. You see. Of our boss, There's so many things that we have to serve, and we think that we're enjoying or that we're the master of them, but really the servant. So that service has to be redirected toward Krishna, toward Krishna's senses. Krishna is known as Hrishikesha, the master of the senses. Whose senses? Our senses. Naturally, that is the natural state. But now we're rebellious. We say, no, I'm going to use my senses as I want, for my pleasure, And you can do that for a little bit, but there's a price to pay, a very, very high price to pay. Another body. So the wise person, someone who's a little intelligent, tries to cultivate the knowledge and strengthen the intelligence. So that's what this devotee is saying, Madhavan Vipuri. Now my intelligence has been awakened or strengthened, and therefore I'm not going to obey those demands of these senses. Kamadin means lust, anger, greed, lust, etc. As we just read, lust produces anger, and also greed is in there. So, kamadinam, katina katita, all different varieties, palita, the orders, durni deshas, durni, bad instruction. I recognize it's all bad instruction. And they've given me no peace. No, even if I serve them, they just come back again. Right? That's again and again and again. Tesham jata mayana karuna. They're not merciful to me at all. These demands of the senses. Desham mayana karuna natrapa no upashanti. But I'm so shameless that I haven't given them up. No upashanti. But now, finally, my intelligence is strengthened by reading Bhagavad Gita as it is. And so, Utra Jaitan, I've given them up. Utra Yadupate, oh Yadupate, he's addressing Krishna, the master of the Yadus, right? Yadupate Praptavan Labdha Buddhis, I've regained my intelligence, my real intelligence. And therefore, Labdha Buddhis, Tvama, I'm approaching you. You can't be in a zero zone. It's either you're going to obey Krishna, you're going to obey Maya. Love the Buddhist. Tvam ayatak sharanam abhayam. I am now approaching you, O fearless shelter. You see, you can give fearlessness. Sharanam abhayam. Tvam niyung svatmadasya. Please engage me in your service. This is really that every one of us goes through that. We may not articulate it so poetically, but that's the process. So now we're reading in the Bhagavad. If you get the prasade, right? Prasadam madhigacchati. We all want to get the prasadam, right? The mercy of the Lord attains them. And then what's the result? Then you can sarva dukkhanam hana. All your miseries are destroyed. Asyo bhajayate. You're victorious over them. Takes place. Prasanna cetasa. Prasanna is such a nice word. It means joyful. It means peaceful, and it means clear. Prasanna, there's lucid, the word lucid, and I don't know if you know the word pellucid. Very, very clear. You see? So your consciousness is clear and joyful, right? Brahmabhuta prasannatma, prasanna cetasa ashu. Quickly, ashu. Buddhi payavitasite. And your intelligence is fixed. Okay, and then we read, did we read 66? 67. Oh, we read 67 already. Oh, 67, okay. Indriyanami charatam yanmano nuvidhiyate tadasya harati pragyam Vayu navam avambasi. So now he's going back. This is how you learn, by contrast. As a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even one of the roaming senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. Purport. Unless all of the senses are engaged in the service of the Lord, even one of them engaged in sense gratification can deviate the devotee from the path of transcendental advancement. As mentioned in the life of Maharaj Ambarish, all of the senses must be engaged in Krishna consciousness, for that is the correct technique for controlling the mind. So Ambarish was a famous king. Usually kings, oftentimes kings are so distracted with all what they have to do and the facility for sense gratification that they're not able to advance devotional service. But Ambarish was Savaimana Krishna Padada Vindaya. There's a list, there's a verse is quoted in one of the purports here. That he placed his mind on Krishna, all his words were for Krishna, his hands were used in cleaning the temple, his ears in hearing about Krishna, his eyes in seeing the deities, everything was engaged, And although he was challenged by Durvasa Muni, again, he was envious because Ambarish was getting all of this honor for being such a great yogi, but Durvasa was his powerful yogi. He had spent years meditating and he could travel and create things. So he decided to annihilate Ambarish. So anyway, this is a quick story here that Ambarish was a very strict observer of Ekadashi, naturally devotee. So Durvasa came on the day after Ekadashi, the morning after Ekadashi, when there's a first strict time and interval to break it. I always say when I give the announcement. And so, but Ambarish was, this is honoring this great yogi, so he invited him for breakfast to break the fast. All right, so he went to bathe, but he purposely stayed in the water until almost the end of the time to break the fast. So Ambarish was at a quandary because it's a great offense. You have a guest to eat before your guest. So he went to his Brahmin advisors and said, what do I do? They didn't know, so he suggested something. And that is, well, look, I'll just drink some water, because that breaks and doesn't break. So no one in his right mind is going to be offended if you drink water as oh, you ate before your guest, No. So Durvasa came out, right after the period was over, and he could tell by his mystic power that Ambarish had drunk some water, and he was chastised. You have greatly offended me by breaking the fast or having breakfast before your guest, So what did he do? He created a kritya. I think he pulled some hair out, and the kritya, I looked it up, is a female demoness full of fire, And he said, okay, he directed it, now go get Ambarish. So Ambarish was completely peaceful. Even though this fiery demoness is coming at him to annihilate him, he was just chanting Hare Krishna. So, but he had been given actually the blessing of Krishna that the chakra would be there for him if he needed it, So he didn't call on the chakra. The chakra came, annihilated the demon, then went after Durvasa. Now Durvasa, if he was advanced, he would have said, oh, great, I'll be killed by the chakra. I'll get it. No. He started running. I don't know, yogic running. He was going to this planet, that planet, this. And finally, and the chakra was going after him, after him. So finally he went to Vaikuntha. I think it was the Vaikuntha planet in this, this Dhruva's planet, the pole star. But it's a Vaikuntha planet. So he went there and he found Narayan and he offered his obeisances. He says, please take off your chakra, And Narayan said, I can't. I'm under the control of my devotees, And then there's a famous verse, which I forget now. He said, if you want to be relieved of this danger, you have to go back down to Ambarish and get his blessing, you see. So he went all the way back down, and the chakra was coming after him. And he goes obeisances to Ambarish, and of course Ambarish says, of course, and he calls off the... So this is by way of showing how this, a king is often, especially if it's not Maharaj Parikshit or something, is not such an advanced devotee, but he had, everything, he was completely connected. He was completely, and that's what Buddhi Yoga, we're going to hear about Buddhi Yoga, which probably says Bhakti Yoga, but it emphasizes the intelligence, how that intelligence, what is remembrance? Where does remembrance reside? In the intelligence. So we have to remember Krishna. So that's the function of the intelligence. And the intelligence can tell the mind, now directly go this way, and the senses go this way. So it's all the intelligence. When it's Krishnized, then you can be really peaceful and happy. Okay, so now we did 67, right? All right, 68. Therefore, now we come to a therefore verse, so it's conclusive. Tasmad yasya mahabaho niguhitani sarvashaha indriyanindriyartebhyas tasya pragya pratishtita. Therefore, Almighty Armed One whose senses are restrained from the objects is certainly of steady intelligence. Purport. One can curb the forces of sense gratification only by means of Krishna consciousness, or engaging all the senses in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As enemies are curbed by superior force, the senses can similarly be curbed, not by any human endeavor, but only by keeping them engaged in the service of the Lord. One who has understood this, that only by Krishna consciousness is one really established in intelligence, and that one should practice this art under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, is called a sadhaka, or a suitable candidate for liberation. So this is basic, concluding. He's almost at the conclusion of the chapter now. And how to restrain, the objects? One has to develop the will, strength of will, which is also a function of the intelligence, actually. Thinking, feeling, willing, Prabhupada often says the mind is doing that. But the mind and intelligence work very closely together. So you establish the desire to be Krishna conscious by hearing, by focusing your intelligence on the science of bhakti as it's given directly in the Shastra or books and by the spiritual master and advanced devotees like that. So on the basis of that hearing, you develop faith to engage in the practice, beginning with Hare Krishna, chanting the holy name. And by doing that, Krishna sees your element of sincerity there, and he blesses you. He's in the heart. He's there in our heart as the super soul. So he can purify Cheto Darpana Marjanam. This is the first words of the Shikshastika, Lord Chaitanya's essential instructions on the holy name. What is that? What is the result of this congregational chanting? You just get into the range of the chanting, and you repeat the words, and Krishna's in the heart, and he'll start to cleanse away, polish the heart, polishing the lust-encrusted mirror of the heart, so that you can finally see who you really are and understand who you are. I'm a pure spirit soul. I'm a servant of Krishna. You see. And that attraction to Krishna, which is there but has been perverted into attraction to the things of this world, starts to manifest. And you become attracted to the chanting, you become attracted to the devotees and the deities and everything there is about Krishna consciousness, which is really a complete environment of sensations and thoughts and ideas and activity, and everything is there. So, Indriyanindriyartebhyas, this is the thing, withdrawing the senses from sense objects, but not repressing them, engaging the senses in the service of Krishna. That's the whole, and then one's intelligence can become fixed. And by that fixed intelligence, then you can remember Krishna constantly, chanting constantly. So that's what so this is why this is said the contents of the Gita summarized. So he's giving a little of everything here. And in text 71 is, when we come to that, maybe on tomorrow, there's a passage in there that I have to share with you. It's one of these statements that seems to say one thing, but I know, that it means another thing. Where it says, Arjuna did not want to fight for his own sense satisfaction. Arjuna did not want to fight for his own sense satisfaction. Now that seems pretty clear. And especially after he heard the Bhagavad Gita, he certainly didn't want to fight for his own sense gratification. He wanted to fight for Krishna's satisfaction. It's QED. Problem is that this is describing the Arjuna in chapter 1 and 2. So what it means is not that Arjuna did not want to fight for his own sense satisfaction, but Arjuna wanted to satisfy his own senses by not fighting. You see the problem? It's called the hazards of not. The word not in English, you can really send you. I'll give you an example. You have a temple, okay? And you have Bhakta Bob, and you have Bhakti and Susan. We used to have, actually, believe it or not, ladies living in the temple. So the temple president was seeing that there seemed to be a little bit too much interaction between Bob and Susan, and he thought that Bhakta Bob may have had something with Susan, going on. So he asked his temple commander, his first in command, who's initiated devotee, keep your eye and let me know if Bob attends the evening arti. It used to be that everyone would attend the evening arti, So, and he said, yeah, because I think he has something going on with Susan, Bhakti and Susan, so check it out. So he goes to the arti, comes back and reports, says, yeah, Bob did not come to the arti because he wanted to see Susan. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean that he came to the artik, but he didn't ever looked at Susan? He's fine, He came to the artik, but not because he wanted to see Susan, you see? Bob did not come to the artik because he wanted to see Susan, you see? If you can use your inflection of the verse, then you can easily, but if you just see it on the page, Bob did not come to the evening arti because he wanted to see Susan. In other words, I didn't see Bob there, he's probably in the park with Susan. You see the problem? It can mean two things. And you don't get the voice inflection on the page. So it's obvious to me, and we're going to come to this tomorrow, this verse, and I'll say, that because the rest of the sentence says, but when he became fully Krishna conscious, after he heard the Bhagavad Gita, he fought for Krishna's satisfaction. You see? So that earlier part had to be described Arjuna in chapter 1 and the beginning of chapter 2, before he surrendered to Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita really began. And at that point, in text 39, I'll show you, he said exactly, Arjuna his program was sense satisfaction by not fighting. That was the thing. He didn't want to fight. Why didn't he want to fight? For his own sense satisfaction. You see the anyway, it's a hazard. The language sometimes is a hazard, and you fall into it. All right, we have time for one little poem. Let's see, one that I haven't given you for a while. Well, this one is something I wrote, and it's become kind of a mission statement for the BBT. They have it up on the wall there, back in L.A. Yeah. Oh, Prabhupada, we hail the day when you appear, just like a ray of Krishna's vast effulgence bright, to give this blind world back its sight. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts and pray with deepest love that we may serve your lotus feet in every circumstance we meet. As years go by and books go out, we see what life is all about, to serve your mission and our Lord's by spreading wide your sacred words. As well you want us all to strive to let those words direct our lives. This safest path will lead us home, no more in Maya's realm to roam. That's on the wall back there. If you look by the kitchen, they have a little bulletin board. They put it up there. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. We'll have Kirtan in a few minutes. Hare Krishna.